will never was. To catch them is my real test. To train them is my call.
Hello and welcome everybody, this is Omar from Team Earthstream, bringing you our very first Rogue Deck Monday. And along joining me today on commentating, it's going to be my fellow team member, Kins. Kins, you want to say hello real quick?
Hey, how's it going, man?
So today, Kins has got a really cool deck idea for us for a single price attacker deck actually. And it's his Rotom deck that he's starting to work on and he's been testing it out so far. So he's here joining us to explain his deck and what are the weaknesses and strengths of it and how are the matchups as well. So right now we're going to get started with why he chose certain cards, and we're going to go through our slides real quick to show you what cards are in his deck that he's got for you guys. So Kens, go right ahead. Right now we're looking at the page 1 of your slide.
So in making this deck, I think the most important thing to me was keeping it all one priced. If we learned anything from the World Championships, it's that gusting is super important. And any competent player sitting across from you is going to run Gust in their deck. So even if you're dropping GXs on the bench like the Dene, they're still really a liability to you. So I wanted the main engine of this deck to be focused on Jirachi. Jirachi, Stellar Wish, we're very familiar with it. It serves as a great leading Pokemon and a great pivot Pokemon. When we're a completely non-GX build, we're going to get to pivot a lot. When they take a knockout, we're going to move into Jirachi and we're going to take it back. It also has really good synergy with the tools that we're going to be using. So moving into the Rotoms. So Rotom, the reason Rotom is good is its ability. If you have 9 or more Pokemon tool cards in your discard pile, ignore all energy in the attack cost of each of this Pokemon's attacks. That's the ability across all the Rotoms, and without Alolan Muck in the format anymore, these guys are free to run loose. Main attacker is going to be your Psychic Rotom, only 70 HP, not a problem. Our main goal here is to uptrade on the prizes that you're going to be, knocking out those GXs, those tag team GXs. So Rotom deals 120 damage. This Pokemon can't attack next turn, no problem. You're probably going to get knocked out anyways. Moving into Frost Rotoms, extremely powerful in this meta. If you look at the sheer amount of energy acceleration in the format, it's really crazy. So lots of energies on the field, really good for Frost Rotom. If he's going to do 10 damage plus 20 more for each damage, energy on the opponent's side of the field, not just the active Pokemon, but the whole side of the field, and also happens to be a water type. That's going to be really good moving against these fire type decks. The World Championships, the top 4, I believe all 4 of those decks ran Welder. That just shows you the sheer power of fire right now, and we're going to come at it with a little bit of water to dampen it. Lastly, we're finishing off with our Wash Rotom. Wash Rotom is a really good addition just because he does a simple 50 snipe onto the bench. Some really good math there with versus your Malamar and Giratina dropping some damage counters, but also just being able to finish off damaged Pokemon on the bench. And this works in combination with your spell tags. We'll talk about later as well. We can damage the bench. We can take some surprise KOs there to net us some prizes.
Absolutely, and the list that you have going on right now for the Pokemon lineup looks very solid with the 4-count Jirachi for that Stellar Wish. You want to guarantee that Jirachi in opening hand because that's what you want to use to dig into your deck. And then the 4-count of the regular Psychic Rotom, you got the 3-count Frost Rotom, the 1-count Wash Rotom. You have a lot of Pokemon here that are just able to come back and keep attacking for no energy cost at all once you get those item cards into the discard pile.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very good strategy here, and you're hitting weaknesses all around the tier 1 decks right now. So right now we're going to move on to our second slide for your deck list. And in this slide, we have his supporters, his stadium counts, and he's going to go through this list and talk to us about why he chose these certain cards. So over to you, Kens.
So the supporter lineup was probably the most challenging part of working through this deck list, and I decided to go really simple. We'll discuss some different variations that you can do later on in the video, but this is what I decided is my go-to list for Ingo Emmet and for Cynthia. So I played around with Hapu. I really did not care for Hapu. You're relying on it you're playing, random chance there. What am I going to hit when I open those cards up? One time I opened up into 3 Rotoms, and you got to throw one of them away, and that's really rough in a format with very little Pokemon retrieval from the discard pile. So the reasons I chose Ingo and Emmet is it lets you control what you're discarding in your hand. If you don't want to discard it, try to go for a Cynthia play. Get cards into your hand. Consciously accumulate cards in your hand that you're okay with discarding, and then throw them away with Ingo and Emmet, or use Cynthia to just net you a whole hand of 6. Ingo and Emmet lets you burn through that deck a little bit faster. We're trying to get this attack off as soon as possible, right? And burning through your deck, even if you have to discard some, just get the junk out of your hand and move on to a new hand. Cynthia netting you 6 cards, always a really big plus. Let's talk about the interesting inclusion of Cyrus. I find that Rotom gets to the point where you're set up. You're about as established on the board as you're ever going to be. You've got some Rotoms down. They've got some tools attached to them. You've got a Jirachi out. And at that point, you don't really need a whole lot more. Again, you don't need energy, so you don't need to fish for that. And there's not a whole lot else that's going to be going on. So the Cyrus is going to let you take advantage of your Jirachi or even your Frost and Wash Rotom, letting you proc its ability to have your opponent shuffle all those bench Pokemon into their deck. This is especially good against Malamar, and that's really what this card is intended for. But any opposing player that decides to overbench and doesn't have a lot of support Pokemon down, this can really take advantage of. Moving over into the stadiums, let's just start with Wondrous Labyrinth. This is a spicy card. This is an obvious inclusion. We need a turn or two to get set up. So if you're able to throw down that Wondrous Labyrinth early game, forces your opponent to have a counter stadium. You have free attacks, and that includes the free. Even the Wondrous Labyrinth does not affect your Rotoms at all. Letting this just be a very easy to splash in stadium for a little bit of disruption on the opponent. Force your opponent's Giratina to have 4 energies on it. It's very, very powerful. 2 Shrine. With the spell tags that we'll talk about later, and the adventure bags and the ease of getting out the spell tags, I find that you're already taking 2 shots on just about any GX or any tag team GX when you throw in the spell tags. So the 2 Shrine of Punishment is a good fit. It's just going to help you hit a couple extra damage counters here and there and let you really knock off some big boys in just 2 attacks.
Yes, and it sounds absolutely correct on that, because with a new format there's no Ultra Balls or any other discarding mechanisms besides Mysterious Treasure and this Ingo and Emmet card that you got. With that new support that you're adding for a tech option here, to be able to discard, that's absolutely wonderful for this deck, because you need your tool cards in the discard pile that you're not going to be using to get these attacks going off. And with the Shrine of Punishment being run in this deck, I think the 2-shot is absolutely awesome, because if that Shrine of Punishment sticks for 1 turn, that's all you need to get those 2 shots on some of these tag team Pokemons. And then on to Cyrus. Cyrus is another great addition that you got for this deck right here. It's you're gonna be messing up Malamars, you're gonna be messing up the Dark Box, anything, even the new ability Zard, you're gonna be messing them up once this card gets thrown down, because they're gonna have to send away Pokemon that already evolved or either have energies on them, and they're gonna have to choose what to send back, and that's gonna be difficult for that player to come back from. So now we are gonna move on to our third slide that you have going on here for us. So now we're into his item cards that he's got going on for us right here, and he's gonna go talk through them for us and why he chose these cards.
So we're going to start off with Pokemon Search. Difficult post-rotation, but we've got the advantage of our main attacker being Psychic. That Psychic Rotom, that 120 solid damage per turn. We're going to use our Mysterious Treasures to find those guys. On top of that, Mysterious Treasure helps us discard cards out of our hand. Very important when you're trying to discard 9 tools as fast as possible. To complement that, we're going to come up with 3 Communication. Majority of the time, Communication is going to try to net you those Jirachis if you didn't have it in your opening hand, but they can also help you get those funny water Rotoms. I find that you have extra Jirachis kind of sitting around your hands later in the game because realistically you only need one Jirachi on the field to be your pivot. But the 3 communication and 4 treasure seems to be a good mix there. I'm running an aggressive 3 switch, and I really want to explain this. Like I mentioned earlier, one of my main goals in making this deck was to have no GXs. So Dedenne was kind of out of the question for this one. 3 switch is going to let me proc the Jirachi Stellar Wish ability much more often. We're looking for a couple of fast, aggressive early turns. Ideally, we'll have multiple Jirachi down, probably 2. And we need to switch between those to get as many Stellar Wishes off as we can to try to thin that deck down, to try to get those tools in the discard. 3 switch seems like a lot, but it also is going to partner with our main attacker, Rotom. Does 120 damage, and it cannot attack the next turn. Now, I mentioned earlier that it's probably going to get knocked out every turn. But if you manage to trip up your opponent with a good Wondrous Labyrinth, or maybe like a really solid Cyrus that prevents them, having an answer to your attack, you can use a switch to get out of there, move into a Jirachi, Stellar Wish again, and get back into your Rotom and attack for a sweet 120. 3 switch is aggressive, but I really like it in this style of a deck. 4 Acro Bike, gotta have it. It's just a must in this. First off, in this format, I think that Acro Bike is moving into a much more powerful position. It has great discard synergy. And again, those really fast, early aggressive turns, you want to hit as many of those Acro Bikes as you can. When you're running a non-GX deck like this, you're going to have the opportunity to pull off this rescue stamp late game. This is part of your bag of tricks where you take a couple of turns to set up and get those tools in the discard pile, and then you start rocking and rolling. Those late couple turns, you've got a couple of disruption cards that you can throw out there because it took you a couple of turns to get set up. And Rescue Stamp is one of them. Use it whenever you need to versus a greens build. I would use it early game versus greens to mess up a greens search that they did. Use it late versus anything else really that you can just try to get them down to a couple cards. If you can combo Reset Stamp and either Wondrous Labyrinth or Cyrus, that's a really, really powerful combination that's really hard to come back from late game. Moving into another aggressive option for Adventure Bag. You're going to understand this a little bit more when we take a look at the next slide and you see how many tools we're running. For Adventure Bag is going to be key because we want to see as many tools early in the game as we can. This lets us find not only a surplus of tools, but the right tools at the right time. And let's just move forward to talk about the tools because this 4 Adventure Bag will make a lot more sense once you see what we're working with.
Absolutely. And I think the 4 count of Acro Bike along with the 4 count Mysterious Treasure is really good adding into the discarding of the tool cards, because that's the whole point of this deck. Get those tool cards in the discard pile to be able to use the attack for free. So the faster you can do it and the sooner you can do it, I mean, you're just going to be hitting those GXs, 2-shotting them or even 1-shotting them if you're against a good matchup. So yes, like Kens was saying, we are going to go on to our next slide for his item count. And on this item count, as you can see, he's got a lot of items in this deck, and that's why he's running that heavy count of Adventure Bag. So I'm going to switch it over to him so he can explain his counts for this.
Okay, so let's just start off with why Rotom is kind of viable again. So new card was released, Giant Bomb. I don't often get off the effect of if I've been hit with 180 more, but that's just a side little bonus because of the other side of this card. So when you attach this tool card to a Pokemon, at the end of your opponent's turn, it gets discarded. So there's now 8 tool cards in this deck that automatically discard themselves at the end of your opponent's turn. So we get enough of these on the field turn 1. By the time we come into turn 2, they're already in the discard for us without any problems. So Giant Bomb and Metal Core Barrier are going to be our automatically discarding tools. These are going to be the tools that you're seeing the most your first 2 turns of the game. You want to Adventure Bag for 2 of some combination of these. You want to slap them down on your Pokemon. If you are against an opponent that has to do a lot of damage, think Reshizard. Early game, if they don't have any damage counters on them, so Outrage is not active, they have a couple of options. Green's Reshizard will either attack with Volcanion, or they will have to move in with a Flare Strike or a Double Blaze GX. Both of these options do a lot of damage, and Giant Bomb can make them question what they want to lead with. Do they, do they have the ability to get off a Reshizard attack, or Volcanion attack? If they don't have the ability to get into the Volcanion, you could be pushing them back a turn by putting out that Giant Bomb. Metal Core Barrier, another really, really fun and really good card for this deck because the Jirachi synergy. You are ideally leading Jirachi. And this card right here makes it safe to just leave that guy in your active. Metal Core Barrier is going to reduce all damage done to this metal Pokemon by 70 damage, giving your Jirachi an effective HP of 140. That is a tanky little wish boy. So it works out really good with leading your Jirachi, and then gets discarded just in time for you to Stellar Wish and throw in a skateboard on it and get out of there. I will take that. That is a very solid tool in this deck. Moving on to the skateboards, you've got Jirachis, you need a skateboards. The good thing is we can run 4. You are going to hit a skateboards when you need it to get that Jirachi out of the way. Sometimes you need to throw in a skateboard onto a Rotom to move it into your Jirachi. It's not a problem. Didn't just waste one. We've got 4. Eventually that thing is going to get in the discard when that Rotom gets knocked out. And you're not going to have a problem with running out of a skateboards because you're always going to have one for that later in the game. If you think about it, in the end, you probably will only need one Jirachi, one a skateboard on the field, and those other 3 you can feel free to throw them away as you need. Moving into the spell tags, this is where we're going to be adding a lot of the damage for our deck. The stopping power that spell tag adds is crazy. So we're going to be increasing our effective damage from 120 to 160 per turn, which is really, really good. This is going to go on your Psychic Rotoms, and it's going to help you in a couple of different ways. You can throw that damage onto the Pokemon that knocks you out if it has a lot of HP, or you can really strategically start placing some damage counters on the bench. Remember, we've got Wash Rotom. We have the ability to snipe 50 damage to any benched Pokemon. So if you have a Psychic Rotom knocked out, that's 4 damage counters plus a Wash Rotom, 90 damage onto the bench, can be really powerful, and you can snipe those bench tag teams that got a little damage on it really unexpectedly and take games like that. Our last tool here is going to be the Ear Ringing Bell. I was just trying to find a couple extra tools to give me the ability to discard them, but I wanted ones that had good effects in case I needed them. Ear Ringing Bell says that if this Pokemon is attacked, the attacking Pokemon becomes confused. Can be great for helping you stall in early turns. One of the things that a big, bulky tag team GX in the active does not want to have is a special status effect right now. With Guzma out of the format, it becomes very powerful, and this can help you definitely. So that's going to be around the tools that I chose. It's the one thing I just want to mention moving forward with this deck into, whenever the next set is released, and the next set only becomes better because we only are going to get better tools added into the game. We're working with a fairly limited selection right now, but I have a feeling that it's going to get better from here.
And absolutely, because right now the tool count that you have is absolutely amazing because of the ability to, you got 3 cards here that go away after the turn. So, a lot of people are looking at this deck, well, how are you going to get so many tool cards into the discard pile? Well, here's the tech options for this and how he does it to get those tools into the discard pile to be able to swing for that free attack. And it also puts the opponent in a tight spot because now they're opting to either do I attack, get hit for 180, or do I really want to kill this Pokemon, and that's another item card in his discard pile, and I'm helping him. So you're really putting him on the back end right there.
Definitely.
So now we are going to go into specific actual matchups actually. And our first one that we got off the list is, of course, the big bad boy himself. It's going to be both the Green Zard and the Billy Zard. So how do you feel that this Rotom deck does against those?
I would absolutely love to see a Reshizard sitting across from me. The 3 Frost Rotom, it is designed to take on this welder phenomenon that we've been seeing lately. The fact is, if you're playing a Green's Reshizard, you have to play the Reshizard down. You have to attack with them. You don't have the ability to search out the Volcanions enough to lead an entirely non-GX game. There will come a time where the opposing Reshizard has a lot of energies on it, and you will be able to take those easy 3 prizes. play carefully with the Rotoms. Any competent player will, if you leave that on your bench, they will custom catch or knock it out. You need to play strategically, but Green's Reshizard, very easy. If you look at ability Reshizard, I think it's a very easy matchup as well. If you take all of their non-GX options for attackers, most part it's going to be like Victini Prism Star and Turtonator. Well, you can knock those out in one shot with any of your attackers besides the Wash Rotom. And then you just move on to Heatran, Water Weak, GX, take 2 prizes, and then Reshizard. I'm really okay with throwing Frost Rotoms into those. Going to be a very effective attacker. I think both Reshizard decks are a definite win for the Rotom with the aggressive 3 Frost Rotom build.
Yeah, because the price trade is unfavored for them. You're hitting for weakness, one-shotting, and if you're not getting those Frost Rotoms out, your Psychic Rotom is hitting for 120. Spell tag, you're putting damage everywhere as well. So it's just a lot of pressure on that Zard player that they really have to think what to do on this matchup. And they, like you said, they can't promote the Volcanions back to back, and especially if they're only running 4 Welders too. Are they going to commit to 4 Welders on Volcanions back to back? If they're running the ability Zard, that's only 2 or 3 single prizers, and eventually they're going to have to use their GXs, and by then you're already ahead on the prizes. So it's a very good matchup, I believe, especially with all the item cards that you have, because you're just putting them that much pressure on that player that's going against this Rotom deck.
And I don't mean to make it sound like Frost Rotom is the only one doing any work there. I mean, if you look at Psychic Rotom combined with Spell Tag, you're already up trading on GXs in general. The fact that we run a lot of Frost Rotom because of all of the fire Pokemon and then all of the energy acceleration in the format just makes those a pretty solid win.
Yes, I agree with that. And like I said, when you're going against the Zard, the green Zard, you're just going to have to one-shot it, because if not, they're going to be healing it. So your main concentration is the Frost Rotom on that, one-shots it easily. And then if you're playing Ability Zard, guess what? You get to use your Psychic Rotom to be able to put some pressure, even more pressure. So for both decks, I believe that this is a 100% win condition. I don't see you starting a bad hand either, because of the high count of Jirachis and just the high count of supporters that you're running, and also Acro Bikes to thin out your hand to be able to draw into more cards.
Definitely.
All right, so on to our second deck that we're going to be talking about. It is going to be the Pikarom list. So how do you feel that this Rotom deck does against the Pikarom?
I will say that Pikarom is definitely one of the harder matches. A competent Pikarom player is going to be able to pull off turn 1, definitely turn 2 tag bolts consistently. Full blitzes. But that means that the tag bolt is not far behind. Because it takes you a couple turns to get set up, odds are the Pikarom is going to notice that and move into a heavy tag bolt to take out 2 prizes in 1 turn. I think that is just, if you were given a couple extra turns to catch up to them, you could definitely uptrade on them in terms of prizes. But the sheer aggression of Pikarom, I think gives it a slight advantage. If this concerns you a lot, you could always throw in a Mew. You already run the Mysterious Treasures, so that could be a potential tech option. As it is, I just want to say that the Pikarom is going to have the advantage in this one. You can definitely take it back, and it depends on if your shrines stay in place, if that Wondrous Labyrinth does you some work. But they do have the advantage in this one.
I have to agree. I mean, because they are going to be able to full blitz eventually, and they're probably going to take advantage of that as well. And if they don't, or if they brick, or even if you run the tech option of Mew, I mean, you could even out the price trade, because you are 2-shotting them on whatever, along with your spell tags as well. So like you said earlier, a competent Pikarom player is going to know what to do and how to avoid that situation, because they are also running the gust effect of custom catchers as well, so they can just custom catcher something else that does not have an item card or a spell tag.
Yeah.
And full blitz to get ahead of the game. So I think that matchup is a little hard for this Rotom deck, but that's okay. I mean, that's one loss to a tier 1 deck. That's okay against against another one. So on to our.
I just want to mention one more thing about Pikarom. If the Supreme Court that's becoming popular immediately post Worlds with 4 judge, that's not that bad. Jirachi, you have the ability to get out of their judges. that's a very important thing to think of. It depends. We don't really know where Pikarom is going to go right just yet. Pikarom could take off into that Supreme Court heavy judge line. It may stay more traditional. I just want to say the judges don't bother you. And also another matchup where Frost Rotom can really put in some work if the Pikarom starts full blitzing and throwing energy just everywhere. You can do a lot of damage. But okay, sorry, let's move on to the next.
No, and you're absolutely right. I forgot about that tech option that they're doing for the Pikarom now. But yes, that's going to be a great matchup. Or, favor for them, but still you have a chance just in case they break or you tech in for it. So we are going to move on to our next deck that we're going to be talking about. And of course, it is going to be the K-pop, the Persephone. So how do you think this deck does against Persephone?
I'm generally a fan of that matchup. I think that Blacephalon does not have a non-GX attackers, and you have the ability to one-shot it fairly efficiently using Frost Rotom. You have the ability to uptrade in general with a couple of Shrine Ticks or take you a very long way in this matchup. When you have the ability to Psychic Rotom 120 spell tag plus moving into your Shrine Ticks, that can be really good. Now they're going to run a heavy welder, so your Wondrous Labyrinth might not do you as much good here, but a nasty Cyrus on a well built up board can really destroy them. I think that in general, Blacephalon is a win because you offer up non-GX Pokemon that can take one shots on it, and that you should just take that and run it all the way to the bank.
Absolutely, I agree with you on that one because everything in your Pokemon list that you have right now for this Rotom deck, it's hitting knockouts. I mean, if you're using the Psychic Rotom with spell tags and Shrine, you are going to get knockouts. If you're using your Frost Rotoms, that's guaranteed knockouts, along with your Wash Rotom that just is going to annihilate once they weld their Beast Ring like if they want to. So it's really going to put that player, do I really want to get all my energies out? What's happening here? Because this deck is going crazy. It's going off the wall. Every time I kill something, it's guaranteeing more items in the discard pile for them. And along with Giant Bomb, well, I don't think Giant Bomb's going to be a big beneficial on this one, actually.
No, Giant Bomb doesn't do anything here, but hitting them with an ear-ringing bell could really, that's one of the harder ones to pull off. I just want to say with 4 Adventure Bag, you can get what tool you need at the right time. Making them confused could be a big advantage with their 2 retreat cost and dropping some energies off the board. I think the best way to handle Blacephalon is just to let them hit you a lot, and then they will build up a lot of energy on the field, and then you just Frost Rotom all the way through the end of the game.
And that's right. And they're going to have to Lost Zone 2 energies every turn, so that's going to hurt them as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so on to the next deck that we're going to be talking about. It's going to be the Dark Box deck. So with this one, it's a little tricky, and I want to see what you think about the matchup against it.
So I will admit that I haven't tested the Dark Box as much, against the Dark Box. So if they know what they're doing against Rotom, it should be an easy matchup for them. Part of the advantage of running Rotom is that not a lot of people know what you're doing. If they have the ability to Dark Moon GX or early game, which should be their game plan, it can be really tough for you. Playing item cards is a big part of the deck, and if they get to take a free turn, it can be really rough. Frost Rotom again pulls in a lot of work. This is another one of those decks that is probably going to be pulling a lot of energy from the discard and moving it around. The dark Pokemon have resistance to your Psychic, but you've got some Shrine Ticks in there. You've got some spell tags. In theory, you should be able to uptrade prizes pretty well in combination with your Psychic Rotom, your spell tag, and your Frost Rotom. I don't want to call it really one way or another. I think that it's a little bit more testing, and it really depends on the consistency of your Dark Box, because Rotom is very consistent. When you run 4 Jirachi Acro Bikes and you really plow through your deck, and your attackers don't require any energy, you generally get that strategy off every single time. Dark Box has problems with that, with moving into its strategy very efficiently at times.
Yes, and like you said, Dark Box is having a hard time setting up right now. I think the highest player ranked 16 in Worlds right now, and they have a combination of different kinds of Dark Pokemon, and everything that they're running is resistant to Psychic besides the Naganados that are weak to Psychic, actually. But they're not going to be promoting those guys at all. You know, they're going to be promoting their Obrion Darkrai's, their Greninja Zoroarks, even their Hoopa GX to get these knockouts, or maybe even the Weavils. They are also running the Mega Celebi and Tyranitar GX, which is one of those new tag teams. But none of these cards, you can't really use your Giant Bombs to negate some of that damage. So you are going to have to rely on those Shrine Ticks, like you said, that are going to stick because they don't have no way of...
well, the one thing that does scare me about Dark Box is I think the best way to run it is 4 Super Scoop Ups. If people start running 4 Super Scoop Ups and high roll, it can be really tough for you. You're not taking one-hit knockouts for the most part, and that's the only form of healing they offer. Again, that's why Dark Box is such a high roll deck. Is you gotta set up all of these different Pokemon. That's tough. If Worlds taught us that like it doesn't happen very often. Like you mentioned that there was someone that was ranked highly with Dark Box, and I agree that was really cool. But there were not a whole lot of them up there.
Yeah, it was just those few that were up there, you know, and they play tested their deck to get them where they're at. You know, the other people just kind of threw it together. Hey, let's go have some fun. But these people that this guy made top 16 here that we're talking about, and you know, he obviously did what he wanted to do with it.
Yeah, I just don't. I don't feel like I've really pinned down a strategy to beat Dark Box yet. And I think it kind of just depends on if they know what they're doing, if they use that Dark Moon GX at a time in which it really slows us down.
Exactly. And to be honest, I don't think you'll be seeing a lot of Dark Box around League Challenges and League Cups. People are going to tend to stick to something easy that like Zard, Pika, K-Pop, maybe Malamar still. You know, those kind of lists are really easy for people to pick up and just play with. So we are going to move on to our next deck that we're going to talk about, and it's going to be the Mewtwo box, or the Mew box that we got going on now. And this is the one that won Worlds, actually. So how do you think your deck's going to be, or it's going to face up against this deck?
I kind of like the matchup versus the Mew 3 box. First off, we'll just say that if they have prize Jirachi GX, you win. Their psychic weakness and your ability to hit for 240 after weakness, and then with spell tags, and then with Shrine is really powerful. So, you know, most of the time they'll have Jirachi in deck. So in this situation, I think we just uptrade on big bulky tag teams. They're again, most most Mew 3 boxes are running welder engines or some kind of energy acceleration. I think we can take advantage of that with Frost Crush and giving us another, you know, viable attacker that's going to do a lot of damage. At times you can hit them with that Wondrous Labyrinth, and that can really throw them. You know, you can reset stamp them in, you know, a little bit late game, and they might need to get into some more energies, and it can be really tough. I think in general we take a W on this up here. Force them to get that Jirachi GX down, force them to get resources into that. And they've got to take 6 prizes. That can be tough. The other thing that you've got going for you is a lot of times the first attack of the game for a Mew 3 deck is either Double Blaze GX or a I think it's a Solgaleo copy, right? And you can take advantage of them doing that with your Jirachi Metal Core Barrier. You're also resistant to Psychic, so you're already taking -20 off of whatever they throw at you, and your Jirachis can soak up an attack usually, or it'll force them to use a GX attack their turn 1 of the game, which is never optimal when that nets you 1 prize card. So I think that Mew 3 box is a win. We don't know where Mew 3 box is going from here and how it will deal with these non-GX decks, but I like the matchup right now.
Yeah, and looking at the list, it looks pretty good, actually. I think you have a favorable matchup against this, because even if they bring out the Jirachi GX, you're still two-shotting everything on their board. And if they want to start using, you know, big shot, one-headed, or, you know, rush-started attack, you can just throw Giant Bombs as well. You got Shrine, you got spell tags going on, and they have no healing going on in this deck. So the damage is going to stick, and eventually, you know, the price trade is going to catch up to this opponent. And it's like you said, if they have Jirachi and prices, that's automatic win for you because you're just one-shotting these Mewtwo's and you're one-shotting the Charizard. That's the only other thing they can really bring out.
Yeah, don't put that Charizard down.
I mean,
That's not an option in this matchup.
exactly. And they have Espeon Deoxys, but that's going to get one shot as well. And everything else, it's really not playable.
They would have to really pull the Espeoxys combo off very efficiently. And that, I mean, with the whole I think it was Henry Brand, right? The world's winner, the Psychic edition. You've got to play that Espeon Deoxys GX attack really well. That could totally destroy, and don't get me wrong, that could totally destroy Rotom if they do that effectively. But when you start getting 6 energies onto a Mew3, we have some advantages there as well with the ability to swing in back big with Frost Crush.
Exactly, because they are gonna. Their first thought is to let me get Welder onto this guy and start swinging.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the advantage of that because a lot of people don't. They're not gonna know how to play against this Rotom deck once. If it's the best 2 out of 3, then they're gonna understand it after the first match. But if it's a Swiss round, there you got this in the bag because they got to learn how to play against this, and you're hitting for weakness. In 2 accounts. So I think this is a very favorable matchup for your Rotom deck right here. So now we are going to move on to one of the newer decks that we got to see from this the World's Tournament actually, and that's the Stall Pidgeotto. Now, how do you think your deck is going to do against this deck?
I just wanted to mention Pidgeotto because I think it's an interesting matchup. I don't know a whole lot about the deck because I think that it's very new and it was very meta dependent. But if their main strategy is energy removal, that is rough for them. We run a solid 0 energy in the deck. So late game when we're just up there swinging over and over with the ability to do 120 to knock out their Orangaroos. With we can if we wanted to, we could just snipe the bench over and over with Wash Rotom. We've got some options because they're not necessarily attacking us, and that gives us a couple of turns to get set up. You have the ability to drop, if you really need to, you have the ability to drop escape boards on everything so they can't gust anything up. And then you've got enough escape boards that you can just keep dropping them on the thing that they do gust up. In general, I think it's a win. If it develops in the future to be something a little different, it could change. But I don't think there's a whole lot to talk about there because from my understanding of their main strategy is energy removal, and I don't care about it.
No, and looking at the list, I mean, it was Isaiah Williams' list that got him into 8, and it's a pretty good list. And the only thing that I would be worried would be the 2-count giraffe rig that he runs. He could lost on some of your items to slow you down, but after you knock them out, there's nothing else that could actually hurt you in the list that's actually current right now.
That's totally fair. The giraffe rig could really, start wheeling you down. The thing is, you're going to be able to probably have a return attack. You run enough tools that you have the ability to continue to throw them into the discard. And let me just say, if Pidgeotto becomes more popular, it's pretty easy to accommodate for that by simply increasing the amount of tools in your deck.
Exactly, and I think you have a favorable matchup against this Pidgeotto stall deck here. The only thing that hurts you is the Giraffe Rig. Other than that, there's nothing else that hurts you. I mean, the list is running the Articuno. That's not going to hurt you at all. It's running Mew. That doesn't matter for you. The Pidgeotto is just for the Airmail ability, which it's really good. The idea of that for Worlds was really amazing to see. And how it went so far, top 8 player is crazy. So, yeah, I think it's a very favorable matchup for you. The only thing that can slow you down, it's not even destroy you, it's just slow you down, would be the Giraffe Rig, and that's it.
Yeah. No, and again, I don't want to make myself seem like some impenetrable person versus the Pidgeotto because the people that play Control are crazy, and they always have these fresh ideas to be able to counter decks. As I see it, it's very simple. You just got to attack them, and you just got to peel through their prizes, and don't worry about their energy. They'll have to focus their efforts. Otherwise, the chip ice taxes don't do a whole lot against you if you're running Jirachi, you always have the ability to get out of a bad top deck. But that one would require some testing and really kind of the other player being very competent in adapting to what the Rotom strategy is.
Exactly. And everything in your Rotom deck one-shots all the Pokemon in this stall version of Pidgeotto. Okay, so we are going to move on to our next deck, and that is going to be Malamar. So with the Malamar, I think this is a little tricky, but I think it's going to be a very fun match, actually, for the Rotom deck. So how do you feel that this is going to work out for you?
Yeah, so Malamar, the great gatekeeper of non-GX decks, you basically got to be able to beat Psychic Malamar. It is a little difficult. Both decks have some advantages and some disadvantages against each other. I think that the main thing you have going for you against Malamar is a combination of Cyrus and Wondrous Labyrinth, and then just being able to use your own spell tags against them. So my main strategy when playing against Malamar is to get to the point where I've got all of my tools in the discard and then immediately hit them with the Cyrus. If you can make it so that their bench is just 2 Malamar, you can work from there very easily. They need to pop off that next turn to be able to combat. If you can combine a Cyrus with a KO, a lot of times what they'll do is they'll leave their bench so that it is either 1 Malamar and another attacker or 2 Malamar. And if you can combine that with a knockout that turn, they will have to promote either the attacker, which leaves just 1 Malamar on the bench, or a Malamar, which is really fine with you. So moving forward from there, you also have Wondrous Labyrinth. It can be tough to get 4 energies on that Giratina at times. And then their Giratina is going to start placing damage counters onto their Pokemon. And this is where you really sweep in with your own spell tags or with your Wash Rotom. Part of the power of Wash Rotom is in this matchup right here. It does 50 damage to a benched Pokemon, which is not, really great. If you don't factor in spell tags and the fact that Malamar has 90 HP. If a Giratina decides to drop 4 damage counters onto one of those, you swoop in with Wash Rotom, snipe it for 50, and that's an easy 1 prize against a Malamar. So you have the tools to be able to take it on. The problem with it is just that they have a lot of those similar tools. They're 1 prize. They can very consistently stream attackers. They've got spell tags and distortion door. They will hit your Jirachis and they will take them out. And that's their game plan. And it's tough to overcome that. So I think it just takes really careful usage of a couple of tools that you have. Try to combine your Wondrous Labyrinth or your Cyrus with a reset stamp late game, or just hit them with spell tags and really. It's a tough matchup, but it's a fun one to play out, and it's very skill dependent.
No, and I agree. And there's 2 different types of Malamars here, and I think the most troublesome one for the Rotom deck would be the one that runs the Ultra Necrozma, because you're gonna have to be careful on what you're placing in your bench. You're not gonna want to place a lot of things, because if they're gonna be doing the distortion door, they're gonna come in with that Ultra Necrozma and just knock out some stuff. But
yeah.
You know what? I was just looking at your list actually. Because when Giratina knocks or goes into an attack for the Psychic Rotom, if you have Giant Bomb, it's hitting for weakness, so it's gonna trigger that 180 effect. So it's gonna return knock it out. So that's another +2 for your items.
Is that? I want to double check on that one. It's our Rotom. That Rotom's gonna have a dark weakness on the Psychic
weakness. Okay, so it's not gonna be able to trigger that. That's correct. Oh,
yeah. I mean, okay, but if we want to take that back into our Dark Box discussion, potentially using Giant Bombs against Dark Box could be a very effective strategy.
Actually, yes.
There as well.
Now that we see that it's weak to Dark, actually, that would be a very effective strategy on that one as well, because it's gonna.
Yeah. So not with the Giratina, but with the Dark Box, definitely could help you out there if you know how to ping that versus a Umbreon and Darkrai there.
Exactly. So back to the Malamar matchup real quick. So with the Ultra Necrozma version, I think it is going to be a little bit more tricky, but I think
that's bad.
Yeah, I think the match is 50-50 because you are, both running the same text kind of, and that's
Mhm.
the spell tag damage is eventually going to catch up to them because after the distortion door, they're going to put 40 damage either on themselves or on anything else.
Yeah.
Okay, so
No, yeah. Ultra Necrozma definitely not the best. I think that most people are moving towards like Tina Chomp, but the thing with all Malamars is they always have the act like a non-GX Malamar build and just stream Giratinas, which is what most people are going to do versus a Rotom deck. I think you cut out, man.
and I think with this Giratina, it's a really great matchup because they're getting these knockouts on these tag team Pokemon right now. And then with the Giratina Garchomp version, I like that version better than this Ultra Necrozma version because you're able to swing in for those big knockouts and one-hit knockouts as well when you're able to spread some damage. Garchomp Tina comes in and just takes knockouts on a lot of the tag teams.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are going to move on to, I believe this is our last one, which is actually made an impact at Worlds. It's going to be that Gardevoir Sylveon. And so how do you feel that the Rotom deck does against the Gardevoir Sylveon?
There's not a whole lot to talk about here. I think we take a pretty hard L to Guardian. They have healing, and in short, our spicy techs don't work against them. Cyrus doesn't work. They don't have a bench that's bigger than 2. Wondrous Labyrinth doesn't work because they are fairies. And the only thing that you can use effectively against it is going to be that one-off reset stamp. From there, your best goal is just to try to uptrade on prizes. Hope that the Magical Miracle, you have the ability to go into a Jirachi to be able to combat that. But I don't think there's a whole lot to talk about. I think that they just out heal us, and it just does. It's not the best matchup for us.
No, and I agree because they are, they're just one-shotting you and they have all that healing options. So even the two-shot method is going to be very hard to do. And they're not going to be loading a lot of energy, so you can't really swing in with, with one of your water Rotoms either to get a one-shot. And so I think...
Yeah, at most that's going to deal like 130 because they're never going to have more than 6 energies on the field.
Exactly. So I think that's a hard loss on that one, which is okay because looking at the list and the decks that we were talking about just recently, you only auto-lose 2. Or, auto-lose to this one and could possibly, lose to Pikarom as well. So those are just 2 losses for this deck. And everything else is win or either 50-50. So you have a lot of good chances going on right here. If you're willing to accept 2 auto losses and the rest are wins, which the rest are the most popular decks right now, it's going to be a good turnout for this Rotom deck because people are going to be struggling to play against it because they don't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the decks that we have for this matchups for the Rotom deck. So now I want to talk about the strengths and weaknesses that you have for this Rotom deck that you built.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll go ahead and start off with the weaknesses, just try to get those out of the way. You have a rough matchup versus other non-GX decks. That comes as the fact that your main advantage is that you're trying to uptrade on prizes versus those big boys. So that can be a little rough. Most games, you're attacking turn 3. That is the biggest struggle that I've had with this. We'll discuss that a little bit more in the potential techs, but you need to understand that and you need to work around it. Use your metal core barriers to your advantage. Try to have your Jirachis tank some attacks for you. Not normally something people say, but those 140 HP Jirachis are pretty tanky. And so the other thing is you're weak to Lysander Labs. Pikarom has a tendency to run that. They might be switching it up. It really, there's telling. But if they have the ability to shut off your tool cards, that's problematic because you're really into tool cards. The other thing is I don't see this becoming a tech anytime soon just because of the lack of searchability. But Absol, in my opinion, really good in this format because if you are not a Jirachi-based build, you might be a Greens-based build. But the thing is, like, Absol could really hurt you because you thrive on your Jirachis. So that's kind of the weaknesses. Moving into your strengths, I think you have good GX and tag team GX matchups in general. And even for new stuff that comes out, you're probably going to be able to uptrade on them because of the combination of spell tag and heavy damage with a one prizer. I love the Metal Core Barrier Jirachi synergy. If Giant Bomb makes more sense to use, throw that out there. But the thing is, you've got some really good options. You want to be aggressive and do damage if they are doing a lot of damage, or do you want to be able to tank a hit? Sometimes you need to go for one strategy over the other. An Adventure Bag lets you pull off that strategy those early turns every single time. I think a strength that's worth mentioning to me is you have a good Reshizard matchup. Reshizard is very popular. Welder is very popular. Moving on to this deck gets better over time. This would be something to take a look at every new set, because what we're going to do is we're going to scroll down that set list. We're going to take a look at the tool cards, and we're going to be like, can I use any of these in Rotom? Make it broken. Eventually, we're going to get some better tool cards in the format that will let us use up some more spots there. And the last strength of this deck that I really want to mention is this deck is fun and it is challenging. The first day I played it at my league, I had a couple people walk up and just watch it play because, you know, it's a weird strategy. You haven't seen it work before. They just want to learn how it goes. And the thing is, it's a challenging deck to run. You have to carefully play those first couple turns. We're trying to get 9 tool cards in the discard pile as soon as possible. And you need to carefully sequence out your turns. You need to carefully hit all those Stellar Wishes and some good supporters. Since we're using that 4 of Ingo and Emmet, it has the very powerful ability to discard a lot of cards, but you need to discard the right cards, and then you need to Adventure Bag for the correct tools. It's challenging to get that combo off, but I think it's a lot of fun.
And this deck kind of reminds me of the Shedinja decks too, you know, because it's really fun to play. You need a lot of thinking with those kind of decks, and just when you're able to understand it and how to play it and what to do, I think these decks can go far. Because I know we've had a lot of good Shedinja players around our areas as well that are able to pull, get into top 8 every time at League Cups. And I've seen a few Rotom decks, actually, not this one particularly, but some few Rotom decks that people just don't know how to play against it. So I think that's another strength to add to this. People don't know how to play against it. And they automatically assume, oh, I'm going to win. But hey, you're coming over here knocking out some big tag teams, and most of the tag team decks that everybody's going to be playing, you have auto wins too. You know, Zard, both Zards, the K-pop automatically, Mew Box, those are the top 3, along with Pikarom, which is just an auto lose for you. But 3 out of the 4, I think that's a very good trade right there.
We'll take those numbers. We'll take a chance at those numbers.
Exactly. So on to our potential tech options. So what do you think are some tech options for this deck?
Yeah, so if I were to, and I'm going to expand this to just from text to different builds that you could do, because not a whole lot of work has been put into Jirachi or into Rotom, in the competitive scene. So there's a lot of room to build here. I like the Jirachi setup, but something I could definitely see is Zebstrika. My only problem with that, not a lot of Pokemon search. But the thing is, Zebstrika lets you discard that hand. It lets you cycle through, and it really throws some tools in the discard and get you some new hands. It could be really powerful. Another build that I thought about was the Dene GX with a heavy electromagnetic radar line. The ability to discard 2 cards out of your hand and search for draw power is really good in this setup. I really tried to keep it, as I mentioned earlier in the video, tried to keep it non-GX. That was my goal here. Another build you could try is running a couple more tools and then a heavy 4 Hapu. I think that might be the best way to do deck in terms of the most power, the highest percent of the time. But it's a little risky. You every now and then you Hapu, the cards you needed to win just because you have to. The Hapus are risky. And if you did it, you would want a lot more tools to make sure you get a lot more in there. The other thing is the card that I played around with the most but ended up cutting was Bill's Analysis. I could never find a super solid spot for it in the supporter lineup. But the ability to search through and get those adventure bags early turn, really good. Really, really good. But I figured that I just wanted to burn through my deck a little bit faster, so I went with the heavy Ingo and Emmet line instead. That's most of the potential Texan builds. The other thing you could look at is different Rotoms. There's a good Mo Rotom that lets you discard a special energy card. not relevant now in the format, though. The main special energy card, triple acceleration, gets discarded at the end of the turn, so it doesn't really matter. Then there's like Fan Rotom, lets you spread a couple of damage counters everywhere. These are good options, but these are totally meta-dependent calls. That's why we're running 3 Frost Rotom. It's because Reshizard is big and energy acceleration is big. You have a lot of Rotoms to make those changes where you see fit. This gives you the ability to play with the deck and kind of customize it to your local meta or the changing meta as the time goes.
Exactly, and just a lot of great options that you have here for text, and it's just a deck that you want to pick it up. You think that you're going to do good, and you know it could possibly do well for someone that just picks it off day one because you're hitting weaknesses. So this deck is just great with that. You're hitting the weaknesses that people are going to be playing with the popular decks.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a great deck to take to a league challenge to try it out and see what you think about it. And also, to see, hey, maybe I should take this to a League Cup and try it out because depending on your meta, if everybody's playing Zard or K-pop, I'm assuming everybody's going to be playing K-pop and Mew Mew and Zard right now. So you're automatically winning against those decks and you're going to be surprising everybody. And like Ken said earlier, he was at a League Challenge. People just went over there, started watching and were like, what the heck are you playing?
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of fun. I don't think it's my favorite non-GX build in the meta so far, but it was a lot of fun to build, a lot of fun to explore, and I just wanted to throw this list out there so people can build off of it and have some fun with it.
All right. Well, we do appreciate that list that you submitted for us, and we're going to get to wrapping it up here, Kens. Do you want to say anything else before we get to the end?
I just want to thank the teammates in our team chat for helping me bounce ideas back and forth, and for the people that I play with for helping me construct these decks and constructive criticisms. Thanks to Team Ursaring and all my friends that play with me.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you coming in with us and being able to do a live commentating with us as well, and also submitting your deck list and your ideas on what you think of Rotom. And so now we just gotta play it out and see what's gonna happen. I want to see if some people are gonna try these decks, and if they do, I would like to see some comments to see what they think about it and some potential tech options they might think as well.
Please tell me what the best way to run this deck is. I would love to know myself.
Exactly. All right, guys, so we're gonna end it up here. I do want to give a shout out to our sponsors right now. We have Nexus from Waco as well. We got the Game Closet in Waco, and our new addition to our sponsors, the Underground Games from Copper's Cove. So a shout out to them. Thanks to them for we're able to provide these videos to you guys. And we'll definitely be posting more videos for Rogue Deck Mondays and new submissions every Monday for you guys. So we appreciate you guys watching the video. And if you can just subscribe, like, and comment, that would be awesome too, guys. All right, guys. Well, I appreciate you guys watching the video. Ken's go say bye too.
Hey, thank you for watching. And we'll see y'all later.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for watching. Peace out.